days are cooler, nights are warmer, and I put the blame on you. Time moves slow, but my heart beats faster. When these eyes are looking right at you, right at you, you give me something to believe in, just what I needed. You're the closest.
I don't know how anyone's sitting on the sidelines at this point. You know, you got graduations erupting with principals talking about only the black people leaving. You got parents jumping up on stage because they don't want their child to touch a black man, whatever history they have. How you going to embarrass everybody? We got all manner of craziness going on. People being sued for providing funds to people who only get 1% of funds in the VC market. To stop them from getting funds, we got overturning of rights left and right. And yeah, now if you just like, well, you know, we've had worse. We were enslaved. If that's your response to this, then something's wrong. If you're not on fire, what's wrong with you? I don't even understand. So I had to get that off my chest. So where are we, Ibram Kendi? I ask this a lot. You know, where are we in history? You know, as somebody who has studied this both at Temple and at FAMU, which I erroneously said Byron Donalds went to, and I apologize to all the rattlers out there. I'm sorry. Where are we?
I think so. I think you referenced the case where I think the Fearless Fund was sort of struck down by a U.S. appeals court as quote unquote discriminatory. And I think in many ways that case signifies where we're at. And so you have a situation, as you mentioned, where Black women receive less than 1% of venture capital. They're less than 2% of people who work for investment firms that provide venture capital. And Edward Bloom didn't go after these lily white male venture capital firms that are almost totally give funds to white men. Instead, he went after one of the rare funds that provide venture capital for Black women. And then that firm was considered discriminatory, not all these white male firms that give almost no money to Black women. I mean, that's where we're at, you know, in 2024, whereby programs that are actually creating equity are deemed discriminatory. And then programs that are maintaining inequity and injustice are essentially allowed to persist. And it's striking because a century ago, you had racist judges that were essentially going after desegregation and allowing segregation to persist. 2 centuries ago, you had racist judges going after abolitionists and allowing enslavers to do what they want.
You just hit on something I've been asking. Instead of folk that chase ambulances and cases that may, you know, give them 33% of a payout because they're going to settle, where are our Spotswood Robinsons and Paulie Murrays and, you know, folk that went in the lab, Thurgood being the face of that iteration of legal minds that would get in the lab and then target cases that would then go to the Supreme Court? Why isn't there a massive move to target funds that 99.9% fund white men? Why isn't that a strategy? Not even equal and opposite. That is the problem, right? If 1% of the funds goes to Black women, Black people, Black founders, that means 99% is going to others. Why aren't we targeting the others? That to me is where we can go without it even being, we're using a law.
Aaron, but they rigged the system though, right? So after the Warren Court made all of the decisions that, you know, the historic, you know, equality decisions, conservatives and people on the right saw that the court was the line. And so they haven't been attacking the court for the last 50 years. They have been angry about these things for 50 years. And so this was why, you know, what it was like 80% of Obama's judges were blocked, this is exactly why they're doing this thing, because they're basically they're saying they don't want activists on the court, but they have these people who believe in this erroneous idea of, like the originalist idea of the Constitution, and then they don't use that in every different case. So you can see that they put people in, and also we can get into a whole conversation about whether judicial review is actually a thing in the Constitution, because it actually isn't. But they've used judicial review, which they argued against in the 1950s and 60s. Now they're using that same thing to change these laws. So they've rigged the system. So if we could get a Thurgood Marshall in there to make these arguments, the deck is stacked against him.
How? If we're going to use the exact same language that they used to stop the Fearless Fund? Why can't we use the exact same? Why can't we just do what they do in Congress, which is here's the law. AIPAC will give you hand you something, and then everybody will copy it. Here's the law. Okay, so this is what we're doing. Okay, let's just cut and paste, and then instead of Fearless Fund, put the unfearless, the cowardly fund that only funds 99% white people.
My mama told me not to say things bad about people, and we're talking about Congress, so I'm not going to say anything.
Oh, okay.
I also think, I think there are efforts towards that end. So to give an example, after the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action, there were some rumblings of people, of some literary, I should say, some legal organizations going after legacies, which of course have historically allowed white students to get boosted, in admissions. But I also think that many of these organizations are essentially having to play defense because of the avalanche of lawsuits that are undermining the rights of Black people, and anyone who historically has been oppressed in this country. But to your point, in the 1930s and 1940s, when the sort of legal strategy was developed to undermine Jim Crow, there was a tremendous amount of defense, but they also created a very clear strategy of offense simultaneously.
So why? Okay.
But Karen, this is why I'm convinced that pop culture is the way to go. This is why I draw comics, because I believe that storytelling is a way that we change things. I can tell you more about this, because I really 100% believe that, as Ibram put in and stamped from the beginning, after Jack Johnson defeats Dempsey, we got a movie about, taking back your whiteness in a lot of ways, which was King Kong and Planet of the Apes. And after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we got all those kaiju movies in Japan, right? And so I don't think it's a coincidence that in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had Black presidents in all these major blockbuster movies, and then we had a Black president, or that we had gay people on television in relationships where we could build empathy. And this is also why they keep banning books, because those things do that. They create that empathy gap. That's why I think it's important to do the work that I've been doing and Dr. Kendi is doing as well.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say very quickly, Karen, that what's striking is we're living in a moment in which the court rendered the Fearless Fund anti-white. So all of this money going to white entrepreneurs, and 99, so much money. And somehow this one fund that was giving $20,000,
like not millions, right? Not billions, 20,000
was somehow framed as the problem.
Yes.
Right. I mean, and so it is, and certainly those are two Trump appointed judges who made that decision. Going back to Joel's point, it's in many cases a certain segment of judges who are imagining that white people who are overwhelmingly wealthy in this country are somehow being undermined, by efforts to create equity. But that's the sort of political current we're living in.
866-801-8255. Dr. Ibram Kendi is here, author, historian, Joel Christian Gill, author, historian. I've been sitting here, it'll be 10 years in October officially, and I came on the heels of Mike Brown's killing in August with a 30-day trial. and something had shifted, and Skip Gates was arrested for getting in his own house, breaking in his own house. We had Beergate. We had this whole eruption in Ferguson, Missouri, that Trayvon Martin. We had, the trial, the not guilty, Tamir Rice, and I can go on, leading up to 2020, George Floyd.
Mm.
And I said at the time that this racial reckoning, because you write about it, was going to have a shelf life. It was going to be a short window. It was going to be a little bit of window. Everybody get what you can get, because maybe it's 2 years, and I was absolutely right, because white guilt has an expiration date. They are not going to listen too much to hearing about it, because this concept of whiteness is so indelibly etched into the souls of people. It's not a real thing. So I've been thinking the way we really come at this is to not just be anti-racist, but let's dismantle this notion of whiteness and not make it let's not develop the appetite for people to even want to be that. That seems to be the problem, because it stands for the oppression of other people. But I haven't figured out all of the details on how to get there. But I know that that's the problem, that they created this white thing, and that by virtue of us not being white, we're not white. So we're in this category permanently, no matter what. Even if a few magical Negroes jump through, get, maybe even be president, the status is still rooted in this thing called whiteness. And if we don't really examine that, we're going to be here another 50 years from now having the same exact conversation.
Yeah, I was able to work with director Roger Ross Williams and Mara Brocker Keel and others, and Elisa Payne, to create Stand from the Beginning into a Netflix film. And one of the elements of that film is one of the chapters is called The Myth of Whiteness. And I'll never forget, Professor Imani Perry, who's at Harvard, talks about the ways in which sort of whiteness gives everyday white people, something to hold on to, that they're sort of value, even if they're impoverished, and the way that that sort of undermines their own ability to work for a more equitable society that will benefit them, but more importantly, will benefit everyone. And so I agree with you, sort of the myth of whiteness, the myth that people are special because they're white, the belief that you have more because you are more, the belief that it is normal for Black people to be more likely to be incarcerated or impoverished or killed by police because, quote unquote, white people are safe and Black people are dangerous, has long sort of led to all sorts of, destruction in our society. And I think it's important for white people to recognize their humanity, and that humanity that thereby connects to the humanity of Black people, so that we can create a human society that benefits us all.
I often tell people, and Ibram's heard me say this before, I think I've said this to you, Karen, that I think there are people who are white and people who happen to be white. And the people who are white legitimately take up that mantle of whiteness. They actually bring that in. They think they can't separate Americanness from whiteness, so they see that. And so they take that in. And then there are people who happen to be white, those people who recognize what whiteness entails, and they don't reach out and grab that. And they do try to do the work, and they do try to understand their privilege, and they do try to make spaces for our disaffected minorities. This is the reason why I always tell people, I don't think that I think white people don't season their food, but Irish people season their food. Italian people season their food.
Wait, what? Pause. No.
We might not season it the way we want, but they do season it, right?
Italian season for sure.
Yeah. And British people are different, but but European people do things, right? They have dances, they have music, they have a rich culture that is not based on oppression of other people. But in America, the whiteness that's what the basis of it is, because they don't have seasoned food because we gave them the seasoned food, right? We get all these TV shows about barbecuing and pit masters. Where did that come from? That was the enslaved Africa. That was us. We did that, right? And because what's interesting too, I think the segue into that is I want to make sure that I express is that they also, because they believe that their white culture, which is monolithic, they believe that black culture is also monolithic.
My days are cooler, nights are warmer, and I put the blame on you. Time moves slow.